So, Vegan Freak, by great scholars, Bob Torres and Jenna Torres, reinforce this notion that vegans are freaks and act normal by reinforcing the concept of a freak as being as the stigma of it, right? So we have to really challenge how we use these, even within our discourse, right? So here's another concept. Robert Bogdan, he was my professor and one of the leaders in the field of disability studies. He says, freak is a term historically applied to those with disabilities. As defined by Robert Bogdan in Freak Show, a freak has historically been referred to as either those that are non-colonial European, right, those with people of color, predominantly, or the second major category of exhibit consists of monsters, the medical term for people born with demonstrable differences, right? So we have to understand the physical difference that people have, or they're just people that are, quote, non-European, right? So now we're getting to see the connection between racism and ableism, right? So here's the next slide. Moral schizophrenia. Not to say that his work is not merited, but we also have to challenge the leaders and the scholars within our movement to say, when you say moral schizophrenia, you're not saying it in a positive way, that saying schizophrenia is a good thing. You're actually saying that anybody that has moral schizophrenia eats meat, and therefore, from an animal liberation perspective, or for Gary Pincione, an animal abolition perspective, that they have a disability, right? And so that's what the eco-ability and challenging the ableist, agenda is, right? So here's another perspective of kind of noting at the stigmatizing of that word, right? So as I kind of noted, here's the next slide. Do you see that one with Peter Singer?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Peter Singer writes in his book, Rethinking Life and Death, that he believes that children, to test on animals, not Peter, but to test on animals is ethically, morally sound if it's for the betterment of most people, because Peter Singer is a utilitarian, which means whatever's best for the masses is what we should do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the next slide. Here's some more images that, Peter Singer, number enemy of the disability rights and human rights, right? And so he was protested, and he still is protested at many universities in the United States when he speaks, right, by the disability community. So here I go again with another book called Skinny Bitch. Has anybody heard of, that book?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the part of the ad of selling this great book. It says, stop being a moron being the ableist term, right? Scientific term for people with mental disabilities in the early 1900s. Saying, stop being a moron and start getting skinny, and the way to be skinny, which is ableist as well because of reinforcing normalcy, right? And the body, and what it means to be normal and an able body, right? So we have to challenge, this kind of, this language, right? And again, vegans are sexy, right? Reinforcing what sexy is, and sexy means being skinny or healthy, kind of going back to the whole idea of a baby being healthy or not healthy. Here's another book. What we're learning is that being vegan has nothing to do with animals, but it's all about us again, this narcissism. If we want to change the world, it has to come back to us because, of course, nobody in their right mind has morals and ethics. And that if we showed them pictures of slaughterhouses and we informed them of animal ethics and animal philosophy and, the respect that we should all give to one another, that's not enough. And so the best and the quickest way of making everybody vegan and more ethically, involved in animal rights is to tell everybody that they're going to be sexy, because everybody in this room right now wants to be sexy, right? So that's, again, we have to keep on challenging. So PETA, which I'm sure you're familiar with this organization, they do some good work, and of course they do some sexist and racist and ableist work as well. And so here's an ad. has your child got autism? Myself being included, being in that spectrum of saying that why is autism a bad thing, right? So don't drink milk, don't have autism, don't have disabilities, because disabilities are something that you don't want rather than something that makes you a beautiful, unique person, right? And everybody in some aspect has a disability, right? One of the most brilliant people in this world is Stephen Hawkings, right? And he's has physical and mental disabilities, and he teaches at Oxford, right? So again, reinforcing this purity and what a normal body and a wonderful body looks like. We have Pamela Anderson Lee, right? Or Pamela Anderson now. So what is not normal? Here's another slide. Save the whales. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So again, sad to say, I wish these ads were not all from one organization, but they are. So save the whales, lose the blubber, go vegetarian. So again, reinforcing this body, what able-bodied looks like, what normal looks like, right? Here, proud to be vegan. This is what vegans should look like. They should be healthy, they should be strong, they should be airbrushed, they should have oil over them. Not that any of these individuals are doing anything wrong, but what the movement is doing is reinforcing that there is a standard of looking, and if I want to become vegan, this is what I'll become. And that's not what will become. Most people will not look like these images that are what we see right now. Does that make sense? The V girls and the V guys, which are, many of them are very nice and perfect people. But we can't be
like that here.
I'm sorry, what?
No, people are saying that's very similar to what the audience is.
Yeah.
You must have got that. Yeah.
So here's the next. And then this is kind of the conclusion of the disability section. And then I'm going to go into the racism section. So instead of saying equality, because we don't want equality, everybody's different. What we want is to be to have equity, right? Equity is the concept that everyone gets what they want and what they need. So next one is voiceless. No, the animals and people with disabilities are not voiceless. They have voices. Turn the screen off of me, which you've done, and I still have a voice. Turn the screen off of animals and that are in slaughterhouses, and you'll hear their screams. Not a march, because not everyone can march. Go to a rally. Don't stand up and fight, but rather fight back, right? Don't call, for example, George Bush an idiot. Call him dangerous. Don't say blind to racism. Say ignorant to racism. They are not deaf. They are avoiding. These individuals are not crazy. They might be not constructive. Don't say, oh, you're so lame for not going out and going to the protest. Say you're boring. Don't say you're a moron or a freak, right? So here's some words, alternatives that you can use that are not ableist. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can we keep the slides then, kind of? I like this kind of change of language, Anthony. Could I get access to that kind of alternative?
I can't hear you that way. Well, sorry.
Somebody in the audience is saying, can we get access to the PowerPoint? And what we would normally do is we would probably put it on SlideShare. So if you sent us the PowerPoint, Anthony, we could put it on SlideShare. So that means that when we publicize the event, we can make it so people can see the PowerPoint that you presented, if that's okay with you.
Yes, that's fine with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll make sure to do that later today.
Splendid.
So here's the next slide. Animal rights and supporting racism. Everyone ready for engaging in racism issues?
Yeah.
So Mike Vick, do some people kind of with hoots or hollers? Does anybody know who Mike Vick is?
Yeah. No.
Okay. So Mike Vick is an African American in the United States who plays professional football, right? And he was criminalized as a person of color that he did horrible acts to dogs, and he was part of a dog fighting ring and orchestrated it, and it was in his backyard and stuff of that sort. So, but what we don't do is we don't stigmatize enough and shame or focus on white individuals like vivisectors and circus owners and and SeaWorld CEOs. Rather, we focus on SeaWorld rather than focusing on the actual individual. And we have to understand that this is one case study of many case studies that this occurs, right? And so again, cultural imperialism, looking at bull riding and bullfighting and cockfighting. So certain things are legal, like SeaWorld and dolphins, and while cockfighting and dogfighting are not legal, right? So most of the quote animal exploited entertainment that of color is illegal, while most of the entertainment by animals being exploited by white people is legal, right? Not to say, and I hope I'm not, I'm not to say that one's worse than the other, because they're not. And I would guarantee you that some people would say that circuses, predominantly the largest circus companies in the world, are run by white able-bodied men, and so, same with SeaWorld, etc. Right? So we have to look at how we stigmatize people. Again, most of the incarceration throughout the planet, but specifically in the United States, most people that are getting incarcerated are people of color, specifically in the United States, and in Canada, it's Native Americans and African American. So we can't be reinforcing the incarceration of people that commit crimes against animals, because everybody in this room, and myself included, have committed crimes against animals. We've eaten them. I mean, that's even the more horrible, and when we test on them, and we've consumed animal testing. So if we want this movement to be transformative, and we can't be pointing the finger at those don't know any better because of the systems and society that have informed them and educated them that we should exploit animals because animals are property, right? So we have to acknowledge that laws and making laws that are punitive is not going to solve our problem. What most of you became vegan is not because, for example, Roger started arresting you all because you weren't vegan. It's because, people like yourselves began to talk about, the ethics of animals and started relearning and de-learning that information, right? And, prime examples, Jerry Velasquez, the head of the Animal Liberation Press Office in the United States. He was a former vivisector. Howard Lyman, who's like a major, supporter of animal rights now, a former, factory farm, supporter because, a rancher. So we have so many people that are transforming, and we need to keep that door open, right? Opposing the AETA, because the AETA, the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, also reinforces and is supported by ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council. And so we have to understand that certain laws that you think only oppress and repress animals actually oppress, or animal rights activists also oppress people of color and other movements. So we have to keep on fighting these notions. Again, I think some of the other slides that you'll see are going to be moving a lot faster, but the Animal Liberation Front, right? If it wasn't for the Animal Liberation Front, we would not have riches alive today. We wouldn't have so many animals alive today, and most of the animal footage that's from slaughterhouses, as well as fur farms, as well as from vivisection, that video, that undercover video footage, would move the movement so far advanced. And if we didn't have it, we would not be where we are today because of that, right? So maybe you don't agree with that tactic, but you can't disagree with what the ALF has done for this movement, right? And so stigmatizing certain groups only reinforces the stigmatization of the whole movement, right? Rather than justifying why this certain tactic are very important, right? And other movements have done this, right? So don't let society and the media dictate what we believe in. Acknowledge what we believe in from internally, right? So here are some analogies. And sometimes analogies are good, and sometimes they're not so good. And what we find out is that analogies minimize the experiences of others, right? And saying that, oh, everything is similar. Well, no, every experience from the Holocaust to slavery to sexism to rape is all different. So when racism and sexism and speciesism do not equal each other. And they don't have to equal each other. They're different. But they are forms of oppression. And they're different forms of oppression. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. I understand why these kind of images are made, but what they also do, which, before you all I spoke to Roger and Irina this Friday, and I had somebody that I work with in racial justice. He was an African American, and he called me up. He said, "Anthony, I really don't like how you use racial justice, youth justice, and animal justice as your title," and that's why I changed the title last minute. Is because you're reinforcing the whole notion that people of color are animals, and there is a long history because of slavery of that very oppressive narrative, and so. Showing these images to other movements is not always a positive thing, and sometimes can actually burn bridges instead of build bridges. And so we have to acknowledge the differences between these struggles and articulate that oppression is bad, period, and that who is doing it, not that the oppression is similar or the exact same, right? Here's again Michael Vick and people protesting him, and we have to understand these protests, these ads are all protesting one individual, right? And rather than a system, and that we focus more on one individual, and we don't have that much energy when we're focusing on a corporation or anything of that sort. And we also have to understand that most of these images that you see are people that are white holding this poster. And we have to know that if we're trying to build relations and challenge racism, that's part of it, is acknowledging that if we're going to do a protest, that we need to be a little bit more diverse as well. And not by tokenizing people, but really diversifying our movement before focusing on these things. I think, we do it too often that we focus on Native Americans, protest Native Americans. We don't, but we have so much to do in our own backyard that are huge industries that are in England and Ireland and Germany, that why focus on this group of 100 Native Americans or Indigenous or Aboriginal or First People? Well, it's an easy target and it's an easy win. And that's why a lot of activists have gone for it, right? Here's another picture in defense of animals. Another, image. And then recently, if by your hoots and hollers, do you know the movement called Idle No More?
No.
Okay, Idle No More is a movement by Native Americans saying that we won't take it anymore, and we will, specifically they're fighting for environmental rights. And I started working with Idle No More about 2 years ago, and I said, hey, Idle No More, for Thanksgiving this year, in 2013, why don't we start challenging animal rights activists on celebrating Thanksgiving, period, because Thanksgiving was actually a genocide for people in the United States, Native Americans. And so I made this thing, this header, and then the Institute for Critical Animal Studies and a lot of other organizations and I Don't Know More came together, and we started arguing that we shouldn't have a Thanksgiving, period, not a vegan Thanksgiving, but no Thanksgiving, right? And that's how you build movements, right? And so now, beyond Thanksgiving and beyond Michael Vick, we have to look at how we consume and what we consume. Bananas, huge industry in South and Central America, but a lot of people are enslaved from it, right? The Banana Republic, right? Enslavement. And so we see that. So if we are going to consume a vegan diet, it's not about just consuming plant-based foods, but where are we getting our plant-based food? Because somewhere, many of the times, it's people of color that are literally enslaved with gunpoint, not able to get a living wage or a place to live that's healthy, that are giving you those products that you so love in Ireland and all throughout Europe in the middle of winter, right? So again, another company is Clif Bar, right? Chocolate's hidden ingredient, child slavery, right? Here's some pictures of child slavery. That industry is predominantly based in Africa. Again, we have to understand it's not just about going vegan is the answer. It's about being ethical and understanding the racism globally. Maybe it's not in your backyard, but it's in somebody's backyard that this exploitation occurs to have to be on your plate, right? So, here's a book that I did, Igniting Revolution. So, fighting for total liberation, right? So it means unity. It means accountability. So us taking accountability for some of the actions that we're not, so happy about, including myself, about perpetuating my able-bodiedness, some of my, my sexism, my whiteness, things that I do on a repetitive basis that I have to relearn and de-educate myself and start, issues of social justice. And to get radical. Radical means to get to the root of an issue rather than just kind of, going vegan is not enough. Getting radical about veganism is to find out where your food came from and is it ecologically sustainable. So having fake meat that was produced and packaged in China to fly all the way to Europe and then fly to England and then fly to Ireland is not ecologically sustainable, right? So we have to understand these notions, and once we do and we claim them, then these quote locavores that are eating meat and things will not have an argument, to defend or fight against. Anarchism, right? This is a theory as well as a movement that demands non-hierarchical direct democracy where everybody in the room gets to speak about issues rather than just one person. There's no such thing as ownership, that everybody shares. That there's no such thing as property, right? Women are not property, people with disabilities are not property, people of color are property, or non-human animals are not property. That we try to build a transformative justice and community-based initiative, right? Where we're not committing people to death penalty, right? So a few more slides and then we'll have a conversation, if that's okay. So the savior mentality, and we do it too often. And this is kind of moving this movement forward. Why do we take pictures of animals? And they're so cute, and we rescue them. And sometimes we take pictures of animals that we rescue, or we take pictures with people with disabilities, or we take pictures of people, from other countries, and we adopt them. So we have to understand that it's not about us, and it's not that they would not have their liberation without us, but it's that we fight along the sides of individuals like Hilda, Tyke, and Britches that are non-human animals that have fought for their liberation, and millions of others that have fought for their liberation. Tilka, I believe I'm pronouncing the whale's name. What is the name? It started with a T in SeaWorld. Tillicum, yeah. Who, fought back and sad to say killed 3 people, but these are the people that are fighting back. So the leader of the Marine, the anti-sea world is Tillicum, and not the Sea Shepherd. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to listen and articulate what these animals are actually doing. And but so many of the times, these images make us look like we're the rock star, right? And we're not the rock star, right? So I'm going to move to a few slides. I know that most likely not everybody in the room is white, but again, this is kind of predominantly for the white animal rights activists, as well as this is not just for white, this is for all allies. So allies that are specifically able-bodied, or allies that are wealthy, or allies that are white, or allies that are etc. that have some privilege. So I'm going to give you 15 points, and then we're going to have a conversation at the end of this. And I hope that this has been useful for you. And I know that technology is limited, limits our conversation. But be invited to the struggle, not a movement. So a struggle is where people are running the struggle, where people oppress. So, for example, women are oppressed. So we join men that identify as men, join that struggle. But when we're involved in that struggle, we're in a movement because we can leave anytime we want, right? So a movement is made up of people that are not oppressed, while struggle is a group of people that are oppressed and they're struggling. That's the difference between a struggle and a movement. We need to begin to listen. We need to articulate our commitment. If you're not going to be able to do this or this, then tell the movement and the struggle what your limits are. Tell the struggle and explain your skills, explain your motives and why you're here in the first place. Is it becoming famous and to publish books and to be a rock star? Or is, because you felt oppression yourself. And I think as a feminist, we need to articulate who we are before we even begin to do activism. Be willing to not be critical for our actions. And sometimes that's hard. Do really hard work and most of the women do a lot of the work in our movement, but the men are, including myself, that get a lot of credit. And I think that we need to start challenging and keep on challenging that, and to acknowledge that, our movement and most movements in the world are made up of, 60 to 70% women, while most of the leaders from Martin Luther King to Malcolm X to etc. are men. Why is that the case? Be willing to take accountability for our domination. And that's like the hard thing. We have to do that. Willing to call out and challenge one another. Be willing to learn and understand different cultures. Here's another slide. This is the last slide. Be willing to take more risks. So if you have more privileges, be willing to take more risks than those that don't have as many privileges. Be willing to do more if you have more privilege. Acts that are tokenizing, is kind of what we were kind of talking about recently. So don't just have people of color with disabilities, women in our movement that, or leading, if you really don't, if you really are not there with them, right? Be willing to leave and not blame others, right? So if somebody asks you to leave an organization or movement or something, do not, oh, well, they don't get what I'm doing, I'm right, they're wrong. Just, maybe they have a truth and that you can learn from that, right? So that's kind of, I went over a lot, but hopefully I went over ableism, racism, and then how to be an ally and in solidarity. But I'm going to kind of go back to and not share more.
There he is, right.
Lights.
Yeah, we'll put the lights on. Thanks so much. Now, if people want to make a point or address Anthony, because of the tech problems, we didn't get the mic sorted out, so I think you'd probably have to face this way, or even might have to come over and kind of stand around about here, maybe, so we can then hear you. So, but I think probably, because the room is fairly small, if you just face this way, you should be able to hear you okay. Yeah.
And I don't see you all.
We turned our camera off, which I can put back on again.
Okay, great. Again, thank you so much, everybody. It means a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, here we are.
Hey, everybody.
There we are. So, anybody want to make a point or ask a question?
Can I just get clarification on one thing?
Yeah, sure.
On one of the slides, you said, in the sort of the correct terminology slide, you said to say not equality but equity. And I kind of was just wondering, because I always kind of go on saying we're all equal, we're equal. And so I don't get that one.
Okay, so equal is a socially constructed measurement, right? So if we want, it's apolitical. So if you are being beaten and you wanted equality, then everybody in the room gets to be beaten, right? So if I was on Ritalin, right? Ritalin is for people with attention, ADD and stuff. So if I was to take Ritalin, and if we wanted equality, then everybody gets to have Ritalin, right? Rather than saying equity means you get what you need and want, and I get what I need and want. And also equity says that you are different, but you also are valued and respected, and I'm different and valued and respected. Equality, the theory of equality says that everybody is the same, right? And it kind of puts, makes us not see and view the beauty of difference, right? that some people are better at running, and some people are better at bicycling. Some people are better at writing or screaming on a megaphone or organizing a lecture or setting up a table. And to take those values of difference out of it and saying that we're equal and the same, doesn't make doesn't reinforce the beauty of why difference is such an important thing in building a movement.
Okay, yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, but just to follow up on that, Anthony, isn't that covered by what all the theories talk about, which is equal consideration does not expect equal treatment? So isn't that covered by that concept? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Anthony. I had a quick question because I'm kind of like everybody, just trying to find my way in all this. I found we had an anarchist book fair last year. There's one coming up this month as well. And when I talked around the tables, none of the other groups, as in all the other discriminations, felt that animal discrimination was a discrimination, and they weren't interested because they felt to compare animals with people was an insult to their cause. So the feminists didn't want to be compared to cows being raped. They thought that was an insult to human rape, and so on and so on. I went to tables talking about racism and so forth. So I found there was a kind of on the other side of things, that the animal cause isn't really seen as a discrimination yet. It's the only probably discrimination in the world that hasn't been acknowledged. I just wanted to know your feelings on that.
Okay, so I didn't hear all of it. So if I don't address something, please let me know. So my thoughts, my opinion is that everybody in this room needs to know that rape is wrong. Not that rape is wrong because that I have to acknowledge that rape could be happening to my mom or sister. No, I don't need to equate if I have a mother or sister and they were raped, because then it becomes about me again. Or that, cows get raped, and that's kind of like humans. And acknowledging, it's about me again as a human. And what we need to understand is that oppression, if articulated to a first grader or a 50-year-old or an 88-year-old, needs to be about the action that's wrong and not about justifying that person, that cow, that pig, or that 13-year-old girl is valued or deserving of respect. It has nothing to do with them. That we shouldn't rape a piece of paper, we shouldn't rape a table, and we shouldn't rape a cow or a girl. Because the act of rape is to destroy and dominate. And destroy and dominate is wrong acts. And so I think that's the ethical argument that we need to make. And that argument may take a little longer than handing a piece of paper to somebody. But those are the arguments that will last a lot longer and make people go vegan the rest of their life than saying go vegan. And then I've seen it a million times in the animal liberation movement is all my friends that were vegan 20 years ago are not vegan anymore because they went vegan because of music, the hardcore scene, punk, or whatever, and they have vegan across their chest, and they have X across their hands, and they have vegan all around their neck, which is great. I've got, animal liberation on my, my body too. But I also took into consideration that there's a moral and ethical value that we have to really understand, right? So everybody in this movement is a philosopher, and we're not just activists, but we're like philosophers getting in there and informing people of hundreds of, if not thousands of years of rhetoric and education that is about oppressing non-human animals. So, we have to arm ourselves with knowledge, not just with pamphlets.
Can I just add a second to that?
Could you just walk up there?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Sorry, Anthony, can you hear me better there?
Yeah, just come up there.
I've got a very soft voice.
Don't change it.
Thank you. No, yes, that was part of the question, all right. The other part was that I find that animal discrimination or discrimination towards animals is the only discrimination that hasn't been acknowledged in the world. And by all these groups, these anti-discrimination groups, actually find it an insult that we vegans or abolitionists or whatever are comparing what's happening to animals to humans. For instance, I went to a talk in an anarchist book fair last year, and I went to all the tables, and I talked with the feminists, and they were insulted that I was comparing animals' situations to their situations. The same when I went to the anti-racist table or gay rights table. They didn't want to know about animals, and they thought it was an insult that we should be there talking about our causes with them, because they felt that was something...
aligned politics question.
Exactly, it's aligned. So I'm just wondering, it's coming from the other side of things, like I'd like to join up with other groups, but they don't seem to want us. And that's my own personal view on that.
I've been in your situation, for a long time, and it's very difficult. And I think the number one thing is, like anything, if you build friendship, literally real friendship, and you join other groups that you really care about women's rights, or you care about queer rights or transgender rights or disability rights, and never bring up for maybe even a year animal rights, and you're just in these struggles, they will start saying, wow, you really care about our struggle. Can you tell me about this veganism stuff? And that's kind of what I kind of do, is just, I don't even bring up veganism a lot, but then the discourse opens, and then it's in a transformative and safe space where these individuals don't believe that we have to acknowledge right off the bat that animal rights people are very single issued, even though maybe not the people in this room, but there's a lot of other people like PETA that gives you all a bad name, right? So the moment you walk into a room, they think you're a member of PETA, right? So they think you are a sexist, ableist, and racist. Right off the bat, they think you're vegan, and you don't get any other issue. They might even think that you're Republican or conservative or neo-Nazi, right? And I can guarantee you, in Houston, Texas, I was in an organization, and I was tabling for Momia Bourjamal, who's a political prisoner for Black liberation. And some people came up to the table and said, "Oh yeah, veganism, awesome, straight edge, yeah. What is this N?" He said, "This N doing on your table, right?" And I just found out. I was maybe 17 or 18 at the time. I found out then that what we have to do is a lot of work on ourselves, because I've done a lot of anarchist books, and I can guarantee you that people, I work with a lot of anarchists, and they're just like, "Anthony, man, what is up with your vegan animal rights people? They just don't get capitalism, and they don't get these issues." And I'm like, "Okay, calm down." They're like, "I like your book, Igniting Revolution and Terrorists for Freedom Fighters. It's finally, challenging these things." But we have so many organizations that are saying "Oh, you can have green capitalism, and all we need is the CEO of Whole Foods to go vegan, and the world is a better place." And so it's not that you are doing anything wrong, that you have to now be a better listener and navigate yourself a lot better because of the stigma that social justice movements, and I'm saying social justice movements from Australia to Africa to Latin America, I've worked in a lot of different movements throughout the world, they all have a major stigma on animal rights people. And it's sad. We have more celebrities, and we have more narcissism and rock stars in this movement than any other movement. There's I can't think of any movement that has more celebrities, from Hollywood to hip hop to BMX rock star to we have a lot of narcissism within our movement. The reason why we have a lot of narcissism in our movement is because none of the oppressed are involved in our movement. Not one animal is leading this movement, because it's very difficult that non-human animals would be sitting together with us in this room, organizing and facilitating a rally, right? So we have to acknowledge that nobody is here to check us. None of the oppressed are here to check us. So we get to feel good every single time we leave a rally. We said, "Oh, we're doing great work," not knowing that the oppressed might really actually have a critique of us, right? So I think being in these other movements and feeling and hearing these critiques are good, because those are the critiques that I can guarantee you that non-human animals would have of us, even more so. Like, I think non-human animals would be like, what the hell's up with you, period. Like, you're not, like, we're not, like, I myself and most people in the animal rights movement have done anything for animals, really, right? Like, we really, if anything, we've moved the animal rights movement maybe 0.1%, if that, forward. And we have a lot more to do, right? To claim that we're allies to non-human animals. Because being vegan is not just, is not the litmus test.
Thank you.
But I hear where you're coming from on that question. I would say just join those groups for a while and then start talking about those like other issues, if that makes sense.
That's good.
Okay, we've got another one, another question.
Yeah, just wondering, can you identify tensions between environmentalism, speciesism, and ableism? I was just struck by the guide dog that you had depicted in one of your slides, and it just, I hadn't really thought about it before, but it just struck me that a blind person might find that quite uncomfortable, that they would be denied that help. I'm just wondering if you have a view on that.
Yes, that's the, as the first person talked about, that's my struggle, and I get the pushback on that. They're like, how dare you, I treat the animal very well. They have great food. I got the animal from a shelter. And I said, there's something different between a companion and there's something different about service. And we have to complicate that conversation of what it means to be service and how do you pay that companion if they're working for you 24/7, right? Like, so if a person that's blind, needs to go to the bathroom downstairs, they're going to need that dog to wake up and to take that human person downstairs to the bathroom and then wait for that human to be done the bathroom and then to go upstairs. So we have to not say that person has anything wrong with that, doing that. We have to figure out another way of living that individual that is blind or physical disabilities can be included and and feel safe in an able-bodied world, right? So we need to figure out technology that would take the place of an animal, and we've done that with so much, like the industry. We've replaced humans with machines, or machines with vice versa. But we have to do the exact same thing with people with that are blind. So, but I agree. I do get a lot of pushback on people in the disability community. And that have written about it and said, "Oh gosh, I'm not down for this," and for rightfully so. We're telling them to stop doing something without any alternative.
I wanted to go back to vegan freak because I understand this is a tricky thing because I understand the problem with the word, but I also understand that Bob and Jenna meant it sociologically. And so we're freaks in that sense. So it's very similar to moral schizophrenia. It wasn't kind of meant as an insult, but it comes out as an insult. And so I suppose because sociologically we are freaks in that sense. But I can see the real problem of using it. And so therefore, I guess the best thing to do would be just to come up with an alternative phrase and not be so insensitive, really, isn't it?
Exactly. That people of color get to use the N word, and queers get to use the queer word, and females get to use the B word, but people that are able-bodied and that are not in the disability community are not able to use those words that have been stigmatizing them and justifying their testing and incarceration for 100 years. So while I get where Gary Francione and Bob the Torreses are coming from, they can use that. They can use a word that is not identified and related to disability, right? They are not using other stigmatized words that are from other cultures and communities because they know that those individuals would not tolerate that, right? And I think the disability community, which is very new, young within the animal rights movement, needs to start challenging and not accepting those words. Because we wouldn't use the N word in an analogy. We wouldn't use the B word into an analogy. And I think, so I completely agree with their sociological analysis, how we are being, quote, abnormal or marginalized, but they can use non-catchy phrases to do so.
Understood.
Yeah, the query is about the term person of color that I see that you use, if it's the correct way. I think
we may have gone, hang on a second.
yeah, that would be better maybe to